Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Sandy.
And this is the Italian American Stories Podcast. Okay, so we are back for part 2 of Antonio Neroni's story.
Yeah.
It's a crazy one. So in part 1, we talked about his early life in Italy, where he killed his neighbor, he attacked 2 other people, and then fled to America. And then once he got to America, he continued to run into trouble. But his ultimate crimes came when 4 of his acquaintances went missing. And we left off where they had found 3 of the bodies, and he was still causing a lot of trouble with all the officers. And that's where we're going to pick back up now.
All right, let's get into this.
Let's do this. And we're actually going to start off with a headline from January 30th, 1908 that states, Joseph Monticello's body is found.
Oh, the last one.
The last one. And the one who Neroni kept saying killed everybody.
Right.
So on January 30th, 1908, the mystery of the missing man finally came to an end. A local deputy, Sheriff Roy Green, stumbled upon the body of Joseph Monticello, and he was buried just 30 feet from the cellar of Neroni's house. So remember, the cellar was where the other 3 bodies were found.
Right.
Joseph's body was not there. It was 30 feet away. I don't know why. Interesting.
This has been a long time too, hasn't it? Since...
Yeah, because January 30th, well, it's still within a month. Yeah, I mean, but it just feels like, because there's so much that has happened, it feels like it's been a really long time. So according to reports, Green hadn't even been searching. He was simply standing near the site, basically kind of protecting the crime scene. And when the ground suddenly gave way beneath his feet, and he actually fell a few inches into the softened earth. And then when he stepped aside to investigate, he started digging around and uncovered part of a body.
Oh, wow.
So it was just sort of a mishap in a way, mistake. Right. The discovery of Joseph's body confirmed what everyone had already feared. Antonio Neroni had only told part of the truth. So the next day, the Florence Tribune published what it called the final chapter of the Bava murders. And it was titled, How Bava Killed Joe Monticello. And remember, Bava is Neroni. So Neroni finally admitted to the full details of the killing. He told the officers that he had lured Joseph Monticello to his home under the guise of discussing business. And once inside, the 2 men began to argue, and Joseph accused him of lying. And Neroni, in a sudden rage, shot Joseph in the chest with a .38 revolver.
Oh, so finally,
he finally admitted it. And it's crazy. All 4 were killed in a different way.
Right.
Jeez Louise. So as Joseph fell to the floor, Neroni stabbed him repeatedly in the throat, later telling police he wanted to make sure that he was dead.
He's got this thing with stabbing.
He does.
All around killing people.
True, but he seems to go for that quite a bit. He then wrapped Joseph's body in a blanket and buried it, like we said, about 30 feet from the cellar. Neroni confessed that he dug the grave through most of the night using a lantern and a shovel he kept on his property. And investigators confirmed the story when they found a bloodstained shovel, the gun, and spent cartridges near the burial site. So it still makes me wonder, though, what did they find? And I do remember reading reports about, they had a medical coroner come in and look at what they found by the river, because remember they found the lungs, stuff. And I do remember reading one paper where it talked about they could have been like the body parts of a cow, because it was ranchers, there's coyotes and could have been wolves at that time out in that area. The only thing that gets me is the torso.
Yeah, I don't know where all that came from.
And then the whole wheelbarrow.
Yeah.
So as the investigation drew to a close and the trial was going on, newspapers began to look beyond the crimes, and they were really wanting to kind of figure out who Neroni was. And on February 3rd, 1908, the Rocky Mountain News ran a feature under the headline, Abuse Made Bava Inhuman, Top Murder Trade Early. So in the article, the story painted a grim picture of Neroni's childhood in southern Italy. They talked about how he grew up in poverty and kind of like a cruel household with a lot of punishment. He was said to have been beaten like a mule and starved like a dog. They said that he was a boy driven by hardship into a world where disputes were settled with knives instead of words. Now, I question how the Rocky Mountain News in Colorado...
That's what I was just wondering.
Yeah, how did you figure all that out? Now, he did have some brothers who lived in the States. Actually, I think he had a brother who lived in Colorado, if I remember right. So they could have talked with him.
Right.
And according to the paper, some claimed that his father had been a murderer in Naples, while others insisted the son had simply become a reflection of the violence around him. But whether or not the stories were true, the article concluded that cruelty breeds cruelty. That's how they ended the article. And Antonio was still trying to escape prison or jail. So, wow. According to the paper, Neroni broke out of his cell during supper hour and attacked one of the guards, striking him in the chest and trying to throw him over a 20-foot balcony to the stone floor below. The Rocky Mountain News described the scene in gruesome detail. They said Neroni, again, fought like a madman, biting, kicking, and screaming, which is what he did the last time, like the biting and stuff.
That rage.
Now, the guard did manage to fight back, and he lifted Neroni by the legs and slammed his head against the concrete floor until 2 other guards arrived, and it took all 3 men to subdue him. And honestly, they had to beat him into submission with the butts of their guns to get him to calm down.
That's how they had to do before.
Mm-hmm. So on April 27th, 1908, the long-awaited trial of Antonio Neroni, known to the public as Bava, began in Canyon City under the watchful eye of deputies and reporters. Every day that Neroni was brought into the courtroom, he had to be brought under heavy guard because the Italian colony was so upset about this. The courtroom, it was described as like a really tense atmosphere. Every seat was filled and extra deputies lined the walls in case the prisoner tried to make another attempt to escape. Can't blame him on that one.
Right. I'm surprised they didn't tie him down.
Exactly. So the first day of the trial, they were selecting the jury. I guess during this whole time, Neroni, he just sat motionless behind his attorney. He wouldn't even really look at anybody. He just looked at the floor the whole time. But then the next day, when the trial started, they called in witnesses after witnesses who had either witnessed his anger, witnessed him doing weird stuff at night, arguments between him and his business partners, the Monticello brothers. You know, he was facing the 4 counts of murder at this point.
Right.
And the state claimed that Neroni had slaughtered them all in a fit of jealousy and rage, but the defense argued the evidence was circumstantial and the work of an unstable mind. So insanity is what they were going for. When the district attorney began his opening statement, he described how Miss Palmetto had been struck on the head and stripped of her jewelry before her body was hidden in a cellar. Apparently, though, he didn't take the ring off of her finger.
That's what I was just gonna say.
He also described how the Monticello brothers were bludgeoned and stabbed. Apparently their limbs were also broken before being buried under the floor. And he also described Buffetti's murder. I guess during this time, the jurors, they turned pale. One nearly fainted. But Neroni, he just sat perfectly still and didn't really have any expression on his face, even when they were talking about the gruesome murders. And when the detectives who interrogated Neroni, when they testified, they talked about how Neroni had confessed to the killings and how he reenacted the killing of Joseph Monticello. They also even displayed photographs of the exhumed remains, and the jury just sat in stunned silence. And so during this trial, the town of Canyon City, it was flooded with people who were so interested in this case. I guess every hotel in town was filled and restaurants were filled. There were lines that formed outside the courthouse each morning with people trying to secure a seat in the gallery. And residents from the nearby towns were also coming and just like standing outside of the court. It's crazy to think that drew that much. I mean, there's still murder cases today, though, that draw people from all over the country. Just who we are.
It's kind of amazing. Not sure I would do that, but I mean, unless it meant something to me.
I guess this part kind of made me laugh. The local high school civics class attended and took notes from the gallery because they were learning about law and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
On May 1st, 1908, the Denver Post announced the end of one of Colorado's most sensational trials. The headline said, Neroni convicted of murder to hang on May 29th. The jury, they only deliberated for 2 hours and returned a verdict of guilty for the first-degree murder of Joseph Monticello. But when the verdict was read, Neroni stood, and again, his face was expressionless. His hands were clasped behind his back. And witnesses said that he didn't flinch or speak or say anything. And when the judge asked if he had anything to say before the sentence was pronounced, he just bowed his head and replied no. His attorney immediately moved for a new trial, arguing that the prisoner was insane and that the evidence had been colored by prejudice. The judge denied this motion, declaring that no legal basis for a new trial exists. So the judge then sentenced him to die by hanging on May 29th, 1908 at 10 a.m. in the yard of the Fremont County Jail. In the yard. So all these people could still see it. Oh, maybe it's just the jail yard, though.
That's
not
what
in
I
front.
was wondering.
Yeah. And as the sheriff led Neroni from the courtroom, he turned toward the gallery and said softly, I am not afraid. In the days after his sentencing, reporters from the Denver Post described Neroni as unnervingly calm. He would just sit in his jail cell reading a small Italian prayer book and crossing himself now and then. The guards said that he ate every meal and slept soundly, showing no sign of fear. And when a priest came to visit, Neroni repeatedly told him, "I am ready. I do not fear what comes." And the papers compared his composure to a man basically waiting for a train rather than his execution.
He lost all his rage. I guess he realized he had nowhere else to.
Yeah, he didn't have anything else to do. But as the days went by and his execution date came closer and closer, I guess he kind of began to crack. He was growing restless. He would pace the floor, whispering in Italian. He would ask guards when word from the governor might come. So apparently he was hoping for a pardon. And it's like, they were probably like, Now his lawyer, he was still working on, he was appealing the case, but he was also hoping that he could commute his sentence from execution to life in prison. But the odds were really slim. And by the second week of May, the papers were reporting that his nerves had begun to completely give away. He was trembling, he grew thin, he was refusing to eat. And the priest, he would continue to visit him daily and pray with him in Italian. But during all of this time, his second appeal was denied. And when he found out that his appeal was denied, he broke down and wept for the first time. Now, shortly before his scheduled execution, he was declared insane and transferred to the Colorado State Insane Asylum in Pueblo. And his sentence was overturned from execution to life in prison.
Oh, so he got that.
He got that. It sounds like it was down to the wire, like just a couple of days before his execution. So now, I don't know how long he stayed at the Colorado State Insane Asylum, because on August 21st, 1924, he was back in prison in Canyon City. So, maybe after a few years, because he was sent there in 1908. And by August 21st, 1924, he's back at the prison. So maybe after a few years, they determined that he could go back to just the prison. But August 21st, 1924 is a crazy day. The Herald Democrat reported that Neroni was involved in a fight with another inmate in the prison yard, and he suffered a blow to the head and died shortly after. And prison officials said he had been quiet and well behaved throughout the years, though other inmates still kept their distance from him. So, like I just said, it was reported that he was in a fight with an inmate. However, 2 days later, another twist emerged. The Rocky Mountain News reported that prison officials were uncertain who had actually struck the fatal blow. A guard claimed the attack came not from another inmate, but from another guard. Other guards denied it. And so it kind of went back and forth in the papers for a couple of days. Like, who killed Neroni? How did Neroni die? Did he die because of a fight with an inmate? Did he die because he got in a fight with a guard? Or did a guard intervene when he was fighting somebody else? But on August 26th, the Rocky Mountain News actually reported that James Tillman, a prison guard, was charged with Neroni's murder. Witnesses claimed that Tillman had entered the area where Neroni was fighting with another inmate and struck Neroni himself. Now, the warden of the prison denied this, but Tillman was formally charged and arraigned in Canyon City, and he pled not guilty. And this brought up a lot of controversy in Colorado over the treatment of inmates. And the papers were reporting all sorts of different incidents about inmates being beaten really bad by guards and all of that kind of stuff. So this was all over the newspapers. The governor condemned what he called a system of brutality and vowed to end the barbaric practices that had brought shame to Canyon City. A lot of officials were fired. Guards were fired. It's like they almost went in and cleaned house because they didn't want that bad publicity.
Right.
And James Tillman, he went to trial for the murder of Antonio Neroni, and he was actually convicted of manslaughter. The jury found that Tillman had struck Neroni during an altercation using force far beyond his duty. Regardless of how he passed, you cannot deny Antonio Neroni left a trail of horrible crimes behind him, all the way from Italy to Colorado. Like, he was ruthless.
Yeah, throughout his whole lifetime, too. Not just one single time. Not that that's fine either.
Sure.
But
I would call him like a serial killer. Right. I mean, they called him a fiend, and they compared him to some of the worst fiends in history. So if you think of like Jack the Ripper in England or London, it does make me wonder how many unsolved crimes
that's
are out there.
That's what I was thinking too. And when I said that, you don't know how many others.
You don't. And it would be interesting to look into it, but how do you even begin? He might have not went, if he was living in Florida, he might have not went by Antonio Neroni
or
Tony Bavari.
Right.
So I will post up a bunch of pictures. There's some crazy pictures of him, in prison in his prison striped uniform. There's pictures of his cabin. And for being 1907, 1908, these pictures are pretty clear looking. And honestly, it just looks like a shack that he lived in. So we'll post up a bunch of those photos and all sorts of stuff.
That was a very interesting story. I mean, gruesome and just sad.
It is. It's so sad. And like I said, if you look up his name, sometimes he's called Colorado's Other Cannibal. So you'll find references, websites out there, newspapers that talk about him that way.
Even though the only thing proven was him saying he drank the blood.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Like it was never really talked about in any of the newspaper articles that I read where he was eating them. And, even in the coroner's report and stuff, it didn't talk about how they were missing.
So that's just something like the newspaper made up to draw attention to the story itself.
Because you think 1907 when the murders happened, 1874 was when Alfred Packer committed his crimes. That's not too big of a distance. So they could have been playing off that. And if they heard, I drink the blood to
just automatically throw out
Colorado's got another cannibal. Yeah. So, but yeah, like I said, we'll post up a bunch of pictures and we hope you enjoyed listening to this. It's, kind of a crazy one. But if you enjoyed the episode, we'd love it if you followed us, subscribed, rate, all of that good stuff on all the podcast platforms. We're on all the social media platforms. Just search up Italian American Stories and you'll find us. And like we said earlier, check out our new website. It's
a good one.
It's all revamped and looks very different. And there's some merchandise on there. And we hope you enjoyed listening to the tragic, sad, crazy story of Antonio Neroni. And we hope you come back to listen to more stories about Italian Americans. See you next time.
See you next time.